Hello everyone. Sorry for the delay. I'm just fuddling about with OBS still, so I'm still learning the software. But I don't know. How did you like that new intro card, which I threw together over the span of like 10 minutes? Anyway, so today is a little bit strange. So later on, we're going to be joined by Djalma, Beorn, and BookSmarts to discuss a recent, and by recent I mean about 20 days ago, debate between Destiny and a fairly new, I think about as old as my channel actually, Twitch streamer and YouTuber called Demon Mama, which I'm going to get very tired of saying over and over again. So we're going to do a little bit of stuff first before we actually get into that. I'm just going to give some explanation for why we are doing this particular topic and what actually the topic is. Right. Oh, and just for clarification, so we're having BookSmarts on because because he has done an extremely in-depth canvassing of this debate on his channel, which I highly recommend because he breaks down the rhetorical strategies and blunders of the participants pretty well. And when I say in-depth, I mean he spends over 6 hours doing this, and it's actually quite interesting. I'll put a link in the description once the stream is done. We've learned from modern-day debates never to modify your stream while it's live, so that'll go up after. But anyways, why are we doing this? This is supposed to be a political theory channel. We generally try to stay above the tenor of debate bro culture and, get at the real... That sounds cringy, but get at the real issues. Well, as I've talked about in previous videos, a major problem facing us today is that the site of political discourse has moved almost entirely online. And this causes some problems insofar as personalities selected almost entirely by mob appeal can and have become gatekeepers for what kinds of discourse is allowed to proliferate and what kinds are drowned out, who gets to be heard and who doesn't. And this forces people who aspire to be seen in the public discourse to appeal to the tastes of an increasingly narrow selection of major figures, specifically those who make themselves open and available to their viewership. It's very difficult to grow your channel by appealing to ContraPoints, for instance. She keeps herself fairly distant. But on the contemporary lefty scene, as much as Destiny would dislike this, I am sure, this means appealing to the likes of Destiny and Vosh and people in their orbit. And as a result of this, there sprung up, I don't know what you call it, like a small cottage industry, I guess, around imitating imitating their style in order to kind of climb the visibility ladder. And this can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on, what that style entails. I've come really hard against Vosh in the past, but I think he's really cleaned up his act in recent years, for pragmatic reasons, I'm sure, but as a result, like, imitating his performance on Tim Pool is, I think, a net gain for everybody. I think if more people are dealing in that kind of constructive, measured sort of dialogue, that'll be very good for us. If one's imitating early Vosh, that's a different story, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But this brings us to the topic of Demon Mama. Why are we interested in this debate in particular? We're going to go through a little bit of her debate with Destiny before we bring on Djalma and BookSmarts, just to give you the flavor of what went down before we start discussing it more in depth. But before we go in, I just want you to keep in mind a few things, just questions to have in the back of your mind while you're watching this. And these are: who are the speakers in this debate actually addressing? Who are they actually talking to? How are they addressing them? And why is this conversation even taking place? What's the point to it? And I think that's one of the more interesting questions, because it's not entirely clear that the subject of the debate itself merited the kind of discussion that it had around it. So let me just pull up the debate here. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so this is Demon Mama here in the corner. You're looking at Destiny's bedroom. Let me know if the audio is too quiet or too loud. There's no sound right now. Hang on. Let's wait for Destiny to show up.
Nobody cares? Oh, okay. Yeah, I love this mug too. Look at this. This is such a cute mug. Look at it. It's so cute.
Too quiet? I mean, it was too quiet a second ago. What is it like now?
So nice. Let's go!
Oh, man. It's really high-class discussion here. How is the audio now? You probably heard a little bit of it. I don't want to get going until we can actually hear it for sure, right? Here, let me oh, desktop audio is not even on. Okay, that's what's going on. Window. Oh, did I see. Okay, hang on. Give me 1 second here. I'm still learning this. This is a very slow process. Chat window. Okay. Right. Okay, so hang on. I did something stupid. We will... I guess we can make that one invisible, and that makes it quiet. And, okay, so let me know if you can hear it now. And I'm going to... Can I mute that window? Okay, let me know if you can hear it now.
Oh, okay. Hey, what's up?
Hey, are you ready to do our fridge unboxing video?
I'm fucking ready for it.
All right. So, yeah, I guess did my take on Twitter bother you like a little bit?
Audio's good? Okay.
Hold on, I remember. I've always got several thousand people screaming.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, me too. This morning, my mentions have been a mess.
Oh, that's good. I think you had a problem because I was screaming at Liz, and for some reason you brought up the fact that Liz, I think, is trans. I'm actually not 100% sure.
I think you were talking to Liv Posting, not Liz. I know it can be a little hard to...
Oh, they're all LI names to me.
Yeah.
Liv Posting. Oh, no, Liz is cool, and Liv Posting is a insufferable piece of shit.
Yeah,
right.
sure.
Right. Whenever these two people up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whenever people
I was
disagree
talking...
with me, I know, I call them insufferable pieces of shit whenever I disagree with somebody too. Yeah, I get
Oh, no,
it.
like, I meant they're like a trash human being.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay,
I would say that too.
I was talking to Liv Posting, yes. So,
yeah, Liv Posting. Not the same as Liz, not the same trans person, but I get you.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I more or less what I have a problem with is I think that on Twitter, not only are you an insufferable piece of shit on Twitter, but actually you like lean into like these Gamergate era tactics that are like super annoying to me, and actually I think cause a lot of harm. Oops, sorry, I gotta mute my alerts there. But yeah, it actually really annoys me because there's this, it seems like what happens is basically there's this like plausible deniability when you lean in on very specific and well-known like stereotypes, whether it's when you called Lexi like mentally ill the other day, or when you called...
Okay, so can you hear me still? I just want to make sure I didn't mess this up again. How's my audio? Are we good? Okay, so right off the bat, this is kind of interesting. So the subject of the discussion is really going to center around, not so much center around, it's going to be all over the map. It's going to be kind of chaotic, but it's the major thing that's sort of prompting this is that Destiny referred to someone on Twitter as mentally ill, and this person happened to be trans. Destiny says he didn't know that. I'm inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt. There is a legitimate issue here in that whether or not Destiny has in mind a negative association between being mentally ill and being trans, that by using that language in particular, he signals that it's appropriate to make a certain kind of response to what this person is saying on the grounds of their identity, because I mean it's a meme basically, right? That's legitimate. That so far right out of the gate has been buried in other things, like just insults, gestures, like just it's not being prioritized, it's not being made clear. So just keep that in mind as we go in.
People shrieking, banshees, whatever you want to come up with, like you have most recently on.
We're not going to watch the whole 2.5 hours. We're only going to go till about 4:05 p.m. or something, and then we're going to bring on Djalma and BookSmarts. I just want to like let you guys, because not a lot of people have actually seen this. It only has like 3,000 views, so I just want to make sure that people actually know what we're talking about before we start talking about it.
On Twitter, and then your followers follow that lead and they bombard this person with even more hate. I mean, I can't say the things, because you're on Twitch, so I can't say some of the things that your followers, where my Twitter was a nice peaceful haven, and then one interaction with you and I've got people dropping T-slurs on me, F-slurs, someone telling me I should be hung for being an F-slur. And yeah, so like, I don't know, there's just this pattern that keeps happening with your behavior, and it seems like what ends up happening is that you go, oh, well, you know, I've done a lot to fight against people. In fact, I think in a conversation with Vosh, you even said you believe that you're the last SJW around because BreadTube turned into some conspiracy about everybody being a class reductionist, which is absurd, and I debunked that in one of my own videos. But yeah, it's just very strange to me, and I feel like people should hold you to task for that in the same way that you have held Gamergator people to task in the past.
All right, cool. All right, so number one, piece of shit on Twitter. Curious which takes I've given on Twitter you disagree with. Number two, cause a lot of harm. I hope against certain people that maybe they're bullied off Twitter, because there are a lot of toxic fucks on this platform that make it a horrible fucking place to be around.
Do you think Cyberwitch Lexi is one of those people who deserves to be
absolutely
nice?
Wait, who deserves to be what?
You said to be You said there deserves to be bullied off of Twitter.
Okay, so this is really what we're going to start talking about, and this was actually, I think, the subject largely of BookSmart's critique of the debate. There was a very legitimate argument being made by Demon Mom at the beginning, and now she's just latching onto anything. And it really seems like the focus is not so much on the issue itself, which could be said very concisely, and which, if you manage to get Destiny's agreement on, would actually be very productive. Instead, what seems to be the priority here is maintaining the tension. It's just like it's upping the ante and making sure that there's always like make sure that people have a reason to keep on yelling. So yeah, we'll just let this keep on going for a little bit.
Her Twitter no longer exists. So you think Cyberwitch
cool.
Lexi deserves? I just want to get you on record saying that, because
on record, yes,
yeah.
Twitter would be a much better place with a lot of these people who's gone forever.
Amazing. So what you're doing right now? Wait, what you're doing right now is you are literally endorsing harassment campaigns against trans people. You are literally a Gamergator right now. I joked about you being a pseudo game. No, don't wait, me. You literally just said you think it would be.
Okay, and this. Yeah, this is where I start to get interested in this, because at this point Destiny had just cause to just leave the discussion. Demon Mama is interrupting him, not allowing him to speak, not allowing him to respond to things. And he's a larger channel. She is a tiny channel by comparison. If he had simply removed himself from this engagement at this point, or at a couple minutes after this, there would have been no repercussions for him. People in Demon Mama's smaller community might accuse him of being a coward or something, but it doesn't particularly matter. The benefit of him remaining engaged here seems to be negligible. Demon Mama is not going to help Destiny gain exposure. Again, like, this debate has almost no views. And of course Destiny hasn't published this debate on his own channel, so why is this debate happening? Like, why is it continuing to happen? We might think for a second that because this was triggered by something that happened on Twitter, that this discussion was motivated by something that happened on Twitter, rather, that there's an element of just a good faith attempt to engage with a critic here. But at the point where you're dealing with somebody who is intent on interrupting you, who doesn't have the kind of clout where there is a strong motive to keep on arguing, why would he continue doing so? Like, he's not going to quit. So let's keep on going. Like, the conversation is 2.5 hours long. It is the same throughout. Like, it's just endless yelling.
If you would have come in here originally, and your argument would have been, hey,
yeah,
you call mentally ill people, or if you call trans people online mentally ill people,
Yeah.
kind of transphobic.
Yeah, that was my argument, though. That really was.
Yeah, see, look. This should have been the tenor at the beginning. Whereas if we jump back, I think almost at any random point, it's just
It's
like...
fucking stupid, and I will call you out on it. I think that's bullshit. But you've admitted to it, and you don't seem to want to back down off that. Okay, well, that's fine. Just saying.
Okay.
But
No,
you know, you got to be aware.
Okay.
You got to be aware. You got to be aware of. Wait,
anti-fans
wait,
that
wait,
follow
wait.
me? Are they
You
gonna
got
tag you
yes.
like that?
Actually,
Okay.
yes, you do. You do have to be aware of that sort of thing when
Okay.
you are. And let me explain this again for you. I know it's difficult to get, but you've made this argument in the past, so I know you understand this. When you have a giant platform like you do, one of the biggest on the web, it's incredible. I know you should. I know it's so big that you this because when I asked you, well, who's the online left?
You know, this is kind of interesting. This is actually really interesting. I watched BookSmarts' whole 6-hour thing, and my memory of it was something a lot more vicious, and I'm kind of curious as to what prompted that understanding of it, because...
Understand how fucking lame I challenge you to a Twitch debate sounds when it comes out of your mouth. 50%.
Right, hang on.
In fact, this is so like verifiably false.
Wait,
like,
hold on.
So, yeah. So early on in this conversation, he could have just left. It goes around in circles quite a bit. It stays accusatory in tone for the whole thing. And near the end, it kind of spirals off. I don't know. I'm curious to hear what BookSmarts has to say on that, because it's weird. Like, my perception of the thing, my memory of it is of... all I remember is the yelling. The substance is kind of drowned out in my memory. That's actually really strange.
you're directing hate and you're being careless with your words in ways that act on very well-known stereotypes.
Yeah.
I know
Okay,
you
so
know
number
this.
one-
I know you. At the last SJW on the internet, I know you know this.
Sure. So number one, how valuable is the question people understand? Well, some people are deleting their Twitter accounts. Apparently, it's very valuable. Apparently, I'm accomplishing my
Yeah, if
purpose.
that's your
So
goal.
that
If your
is
goal is to
number one.
harass people off of Twitter, which it apparently is. Apparently you
That's
believe...
all we do on Twitter now. That's all of your everybody.
Oh,
that's
don't even
involved in
try.
Twitter-
Destiny, you can't even... I would love to see what your justification for why Cyberwitch Lexi should be bullied off Twitter, but I'm sure... it's just amazing, because the level of, of discourse and engagement you engage in is literally just as bad as anybody you could possibly impugn. And me making one tweet, and then your simps flooding my mentions for hours, is hilarious. It's, actually hilarious. You are the toxic influence on Twitter that you always rail against. You really are.
That was a really nice story. So when you
Yeah, it
talk
was.
about whether or not some people
It's also
should be bullied
true.
on Twitter, that's great.
She's right, it is true. And I mean, what's kind of interesting about this conversation is that... yeah. I mean, Destiny is right. No, sorry, not Destiny is right. Demon Mama is right. But she doesn't point this out. Like, there's... she does point it out, but she points it out badly. At some point in the bit... sorry, I'm just kind of meandering here. I'm actually kind of taken aback.
So if you talk about whether or not some people should be bullied off Twitter, there are people that are constantly making horrendous statements that are trying to deplatform me or bully me off of platforms. So why the fuck wouldn't I return fire? Of course I
Wait.
will.
Do you think that Cyberwitch Lexi is somebody who was trying to just bully you up? See, you're doing this thing where you're just smearing all people together. You're mad at some random other person who might have a campaign against you, which is shitty. I don't think you should be deplatformed.
Cyberwitch Lexi has literally been involved in tweets related to this.
Really?
You want to
Like
give
what?
me,
Do you want to
Sure,
want
if you want to give me a couple
substantiate
minutes? Yeah, people
Yeah.
in chat can start throwing up.
Yeah,
the
sure. I
screenshots if you
would
want.
love to see where you have where Cyberwitch Lexi, the terrifying just reached partner, one of a few trans people on Twitch at all to a
Can
reached
you
partner.
stop? Why are you so obsessed about?
Oh
making
wait,
this
because
about
it's
trans
actually
people?
important. Wait, I thought you were the last SJW on the internet, Destiny. I thought you
None
recognized.
of my issues
Wait,
with these people have
identity
anything to
politics
do with them being
matters.
trans.
Wait,
Why
it
are you
doesn't
so
matter.
upset
Wait a minute. It doesn't matter if your issue personally is with them being trans. The outcome is what matters. The outcome is that you are driving.
I have never attacked any of these people for anything related to them being trans.
I don't
And on
know.
a personal level,
It's really weird. Again, there's that plausible deniability. I didn't attack them for being trans. I just called a prominent open trans person, one of the few on Twitch, a mentally ill deranged person. Yeah, that's a little fucked. That's just a little fucked. It's almost like you're doing the exact. Remember, Sargon. Sargon would do this all the time. Sargon's a great example for this because he would do it all the time, and I genuinely believe Sargon is too stupid to actually know what he's doing. But I didn't think you were too stupid to know what you were acting.
Okay, so these are contradictory. So she's accusing him of engaging in plausible deniability. So he can say something that can plausibly not be directed at the person's trans identity, but at the same time, she wants to say that he's too stupid to know what he's doing. The former thing contradicts the latter. This is a very strange discussion. I don't know why Destiny's engaging in it. Because, I mean, Demon Mama's critique of him is actually quite apt. He was being irresponsible in that respect. Not in the sense... I mean, he will bring up later on that, well, I can't criticize trans people on Twitter because of my scale. Well, maybe not, but you probably have to do so carefully, because when you have that kind of size, you are putting a target on the backs of the people you're talking to. So this is what's interesting to me. And I'm having a similar experience here as I had with my initial encounter with Vosh. And Vosh, of course, like, objectively cleared up later on. This viewing, and granted, like, I've been sort of going all over the map with these clips, this viewing doesn't match my memory of it. Like, the content is different from what I recall hearing. It's much more coherent and measured on a second listen. So what is it about this style that is obscuring that? Because it is a style thing. It's like, for example, like, watch... I'm going to quiet it down for a second. Watch how Demon Mama is talking, how she's gesticulating while she talks.
Actually doing.
So I try not to call people retarded anymore, because I feel like that's kind of
Okay,
a bad
but that's not here. That's neither here nor there.
Well, sure. So now instead of saying that this person is retarded, you should say this person is like mentally ill. This person has a mental illness. I talk about terminally online people all the time. I'm pretty sure there's like 2 tweets back. I literally say, like, if you were terminally online screaming on Twitter,
yeah, you did that. You said that after, sure. That's fine.
Sure.
If you want to say that, that's great. But wait. Let me ask you a quick question.
Any trans person mentally ill, that, like, what am I calling them mentally ill because they're trans?
Quick clarifying question: Is it or is it not true? And again, I'm asking you this with the assumption that you are, as you have claimed on multiple occasions, not just in the Vosh one, I've seen this in other videos, that you're the last SJW on the internet. You're a social justice.
You are really fixated.
Yes, absolutely. Of course I do, because this is what you're selling yourself as to your audience. And if that's the case, I think it's pertinent to point out the fact that you're not being honest about that. If you aren't. So here's the thing: if you're like some sort of supporter for social justice, surely you will know.
Here, this is a bad clip, because this is where it gets kind of measured.
Any of them, they all do the exact same thing that you're doing right now, which is
equivocating. The fact that you think that I'm comparable to any of these people show how absolutely.
Oh yeah, on Twitter you are. Yeah, on Twitter you are.
It's absolutely not.
What does that have?
Arguments and points. It's always going to direct hate towards that person.
No, it isn't always. There are many ways. Oh, this Destiny, you've made this argument before. Don't be disingenuous.
Your arguments come up.
All right, here we go.
We're like, you've said this before. You've said this before.
Yeah, so this whole thing is performative, isn't it? I mean, even in terms of how these people are addressing the camera, Destiny's more subtle about it. Demon, he is also, of course, doing it. But I mean, who are they looking at? Like, that's kind of interesting to me. So, Destiny isn't looking at the camera when he's speaking. He's looking at, presumably, the picture of Demon Mama on his screen. Presumably. Demon Mama is also looking at the picture on his screen, but is gesticulating at the camera itself. There are points in the debate where she's looking at the chat while they're talking, and I wish I had taken timestamps down. That would have been useful. But, yeah, we'll get into that when we have BookSmarts and Djalma on in a second. So, anyways, you've got a sense of the tenor of the debate. You know what the topic is. I'm actually really interested in seeing how Djalma and BookSmarts play off each other when we talk about this. So let's move on to that. Let's just bring them up quickly. All right, you guys ready to go? This is my first live stream using OBS, so that's why it's a little bit slapdash, but it'll get tighter as time goes on. I'm just bringing on BookSmarts and Djalma right now. All right, so let's start a voice call. we can see Djalma. Hello. We are live. How are you guys doing?
Not too bad. How are you?
Quite well, thank you. BookSmarts, are you with us? I will take that as a no. So Djalma, you managed to see a bit of the debate. What did you think of it so far? I was actually kind of surprised I think this is actually my third viewing, but I don't know. It's not what I recall it. There's something about the style of this particular speaking style that's really masking the content, even on multiple viewings. Because if I go to a tiny clip in isolation, it actually seems fairly reasonable most of the time. It's the interruptions and the gesticulations and that stuff. That stuff really is loud in my memory.
Yeah, sorry, that was a replay. So the difficulty that I'm having in general with this discussion is that it sort of becomes a bit of a rhetorical minefield, right?
Mm.
So, sorry, can you just say something quickly so I make sure that I have everything set up well here?
You actually sound great.
Okay, perfect, great. And so basically the difficulty that I'm having with it is that it ends up being ultimately a bit of a rhetorical minefield. I think that your secondary response to it was pretty much in line with my own thinking. You know, I came in obviously heavily sympathetic to Demon Mama over Destiny, and then upon rewatching it, realized a lot of what I thought was an authentic critique might actually be kind of cynical or polemical. So this whole thing about plausible deniability really kind of cinches the analysis for me. And basically, when you're looking at the kind of the way that they're both attempting to frame what occurred, it's ultimately, I think, going to be incorrect that somebody like Destiny was going in and critiquing people and using a bunch of bluntly what are slurs against people with mental illnesses in a way that kind of assumed something about their transness. At the same time, there's no doubt that it's a incredibly politically incorrect, so to speak, move for a reason, which is that the psychiatric history is linked into the gender identity in ways that have been incredibly toxic and problematic. And so
Right.
I don't know what Destiny would have lost by admitting that, yeah, even though I wasn't targeting the person's identity in any significant way in this instance, I do understand and I do respect them evoking this, incredibly problematic history and the association between the two. So maybe I should be more careful. What would he lose by saying that to her at that juncture? And if he had said that, would she go easier on him? Like that's one of the things that came up for me.
Yeah, This is what's kind of confusing for me, because I've watched quite a bit of Destiny recently, and it actually seems fairly astute most of the time. This was dumb from a cynical perspective, and if he was earnestly trying to have a conversation. I don't know. Like it seemed like he wasn't processing what was being said to him properly.
Yeah, I'm wondering if also I think there's a bit of I don't know how to describe it, but you know how we can kind of process things as conceptual facts that we don't understand as emotional facts, right? Which I know is kind of a bogus sounding distinction.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that in this instance, what's going on is he's failing to want to engage substantively with the notion of anyone being trans because it makes him sort of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Rather than choosing to engage and say, hey, I was targeting, the fact they appear to be engaging in really problematic rhetoric, not their trans identity. However, I get the two are interlinked. Want to tell me more about that? So there's almost like this emotional refusal to actually engage with being trans as a serious topic or to engage with any of the more serious points that Demon Mama is bringing up. At the same time, I don't see Demon Mama ever going into any kind of explanation about how the two categories are interlinked historically. And yeah, you could say that, like, no, she doesn't have a duty to, and she doesn't have a duty to inform him about the ways in which transphobic slurs have been used against trans people historically and intermingled them with slurs against mentally ill people and how it's basically was born out of a psychiatric category. Like, she doesn't have any reason to actually have to justify the community to him in that way. But at the same time, I wonder what he would have lost had he actually conceded that point. I wonder what she would have lost by justifying it. So This is why this kind of punditry tends to not go a level deeper down. And these aren't stupid people. These are bright people. So what's at stake for them in not taking the discussion a level down?
Extremely,
that's really
extremely bright people. Like I mean, not in a BookSmart type way. Pardon me for that, but I mean, to maintain that momentum, especially with that kind of topic that quickly, you have to be smart. I don't think any of these people are even remotely dumb. It's what is the purpose of the conversation outside of the conversation? And
Sure.
yeah, so there's a very reasonable explanation on Demon Mama's side, in that if she can generate enough controversy with this person, this contributes to massive growth if she performs well. On Destiny's side, I don't know, because exactly what you said. Like there was nothing to be lost. Did we just get joined by BookSmarts?
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, how are you doing?
So one thing I was going to just jump in on there first, and then I'm going
please.
to hand it over to BookSmarts a bit, is that here's the thing. If we looked non-cynically at what both have to gain externally from this discussion, that's what makes more sense to me than how they engaged internally. So internally, Destiny had an option to back off or to see the point. Demon Mama had an option to go in and like get into some of the intermingling of violence committed against people with mental illnesses and people who are trans. They both had an opportunity to take it a level deeper, but externally, it makes sense why they would both get into this debate. On his end, I think it's largely about reputational damage control, right? So what he's trying to get into is a discussion of, look, I'm engaging in the normal political and social world of Twitter. Nothing I'm doing everything is par for the course. Nothing I'm doing is targeting any marginalized population. I gotta engage in damage control and this sort of hypersensitivity to want to do that, even when his interlocutor is someone who presumably couldn't touch him in terms of status. On her end, if we view what she's doing non-cynically, then maybe she actually seriously has an issue with trans people being harassed and bullied and attacked on social media platforms under the guise of people going after mental illness. Like, if people are being insufficiently sensitive to the linkages between these two forms of discrimination, and it results in actual harm being caused to trans people, that's a worthwhile cause to go after. So that's why I initially sided with her, right? So to me, the external reasons for them both to go after this and both to either engage in reputational damage control on the one hand, or to open up a serious issue with the treatment of the trans community on Twitter, those seem like reasonable reasons to enter into it. When they got into it, they lost a lot of opportunities. It was tactically really weak on both sides. So that's kind of my takedown of that. It's like they had every reason to start the chess game, but nobody moved their pieces effectively.
Yeah, see, my interaction with this debate was actually kind of the opposite of yours. So I remember, I was entirely sympathetic to the arguments being put forward by Demon Mama throughout the debate. I was extremely frustrated because, bluntly, the manner in which she gave those arguments and the stuff she brought in that kind of clouded everything up, it gave a really bad look to that whole line of argumentation in the first place. It's like it's almost self-slander, right? It's like this is how the kinds of people who feel this sort of argument behave, and it's entirely apart from the legitimacy of the argument itself. But when you're dealing with, especially given the topic, you're dealing with people who are taking these kinds of subliminal signals, like you use the word mentally ill with respect to critique of a trans person's Twitter post, and this is what brings in the wolves. This is something that I would have expected her to be super attentive to. That your portrayal matters to a great degree, and not just to the end of frustrating your opponent. Because I think in terms of the actual argumentation, I don't think Destiny really had a leg to stand on. He seemed kind of grasping throughout more or less the whole thing. I think that she was fairly on point in terms of what she was arguing for and what her motives were, or at least the motives that she gave. I think, I don't know.
So there's one possible lens to view this through that might actually be somewhat more productive, which is that I think there's a heavy pressure, and I think rightly so within the trans community for a lot of people to kind of existentially put their neck out for other people, especially if somebody, due to the whether or not it was maliciousness, whether or not it was equivocating categories carelessly, or just engaging in a toxic culture mindlessly, whatever it was Destiny was doing.
Yeah.
If it did cause reasonable if we have reasonable reason to believe, sorry, that's redundant. If we have reason to believe that it did cause considerable harm to, what was her name? Some Cyberwitch
Lexi?
Cyberwitch Lexi.
Yeah.
Then the stakes of the debate sort of shift. And so then suddenly you could imagine Demon Mama having a lot of pressure on her to existentially stand up for another member of the community and to assume that her interlocutor is malicious for the sake of protecting to the fullest extent possible somebody with whom she's immediately identified. And so at that point, it's like you can no longer, in order to engage in good faith with other community members of the trans community, she has to almost engage in bad faith with someone outside of the community, out of the assumption that they can't be reasoned with or argued with or brought around, and that in doing so, she may accidentally betray other people in her own community. I can't get into her psychology around this, but I think what happens is the assumption becomes after a while that there's existential stakes involved, right? Like it's a personal existential thing because people are getting harmed.
Fair enough.
And that changes the tenor of the debate, right?
Yeah. Sorry, BookSmarts, you were going to say something, or? Actually, since you're here, I really wanted you in because you've, of course, gone through this debate. I mean, over 6 hours even, and I think you were going through it fairly fine-tooth comb. I think you managed to get about halfway through and then you skipped the end, which is fair.
Yeah, just about.
You know more about... I imagine that you have more insight into Destiny's psychology with respect to this whole thing. What, in your opinion, was the reason for him continuing this debate past the various points at which he had... Because eventually he did just, like, clock out. Why didn't he earlier, in your opinion? Like, what was to be gained? Given that he wasn't, like... Yeah.
So I can call you president, and then who should I call... how should I refer to you?
I go by Djalma, so... Yeah.
And just call me Sunday.
Sunday
and Djalma, yeah.
Sunday and Djalma, awesome.
That's right.
So I think what Djalma was getting at earlier about how, like, attacks on Destiny's pride are things that he feels the need to, like, address. And I think that that's a huge reason why he got distracted in the very beginning trying to address every single thing that Demon Mama was putting out that was attacks on his character or attacks on past positions or things like that. And so I think he got distracted in those. And if he is convinced that he's at a rhetorical or like at the entire debate level, if he thinks that he's losing because of the things that this other person is saying, I think he's very tempted to try and take the time to diffuse all of that. And once he found himself like wrapped up in like 15 or 20 different like bits of this, I think it became confusing, where he was like stuck in it to the point where I don't think it was practical for him to leave if he didn't want to look bad.
You used an analogy in your review that I thought was really interesting. You described Destiny as being like something like a diver, and he takes you down, and he's expecting you to like, want to struggle up for the surface just because he has like an endurance for this kind of thing that most people don't. And what the mistake he made was, well, not the mistake he made, but Demon Mama doesn't fit this description. She was able, like, for whatever the flaws in her argumentation were, she was able to keep up that tempo just throughout the whole thing and not actually appear weak, except for a few pretty bad points near the end when she was clearly like losing steam. That's style in the first place. That like. That I'm gonna grab you and I'm gonna take you in, and we're just going to like hammer you with all of the stuff that you're gonna need to address. It's not quite what you'd call gish galloping, but it still relies on putting your interlocutor under duress. And my wonder here is, in your opinion, like how would you rate? Like, what is your opinion on that and the whole Destiny form of debate as from the outside? Like, what does it accomplish, in your opinion?
Well, it accomplishes a lot. Like, because if the other person fails in this analogy, if the other person needs to come up for air,
Yeah.
that's your moment to attack. So if the other person breaks emotionally or they break their composure, his strength is that he can appear calm outwardly, and he can appear like nothing is affecting him. So if he can contrast his like calm demeanor to this other person who appears to be freaking out or flailing or who is upset in some kind of way, he can look a lot better, and I think he uses that to his advantage a lot. The problem is when somebody that he takes down that path is able to keep up with him and is able to like have retorts that are on par with his own, or if they don't get if they don't get worked up by any like ground that he is gaining. So like even if he says something that's impactful, if the other person doesn't treat it as such, or they don't start getting emotional, or they don't start freaking out, it doesn't work in his favor anymore. But I think that's generally what he's going for with that. Like with Nina, who was another person that he spoke to in a different panel, he immediately upset her by poking fun at her. And because she freaked out, even if she had like a good position, or even if his position was poor, he comes out of that on top no matter what she says, because she is being emotional or because she is lashing out at him.
No,
Right.
unless she comes up with an argument that actually outpaces his, right? So he's also there's some kind of structural arrogance in that, because presumably you can be incredibly emotionally overwrought and simultaneously ripping someone apart argumentatively at the same time. Like you could imagine, if again, like if they took any of the opportunities given to either of them to elucidate their points further, like Demon Mama talking about how Destiny calls himself, the last SJW, and sort of the cynicism around the category of SJW as an identity, or if he went after, her and said, actually, everything on BreadTube is class reductionist. Like they could have, there's moments where they could kind of transcend working each other up, and where even if she did get worked up, she could probably have gone a level beneath that. One thing that freaks me out about these things, and I was going to ask you about this, BookSmarts, is that when Destiny's engaging like this, how
trying to say. And if like in the case of Demon Mama, if she interrupts very early on where he's trying to paint her as like a crazy lefty or this or that or the other thing, and he's not able to get part B, which is his actual point out, he looks real bad. And I think that that's part of what happened in the beginning of this talk, is he wasn't even able to get to what would be the actual criticism of her argument or an actual response to it, because he was too busy trying to like throw mud at her, because he thought that she was throwing mud at him, which to be fair she kind of was. And so I think that's what's going on there. I think normally there is an argument, but we just didn't get to that a lot, at least in like the first half of things. And when we did, Demon Mama didn't really respond at like you said when you described it as like it's like we're watching a game and everybody's in an okay position, but they're just like not playing it well. That's what I saw here too, because he would push Demon Mama on a question or something that would clearly like progress the debate forward at like a larger level, like it would help them to resolve any like disputes between them. And then what would happen is she doesn't respond to it, or she starts continuing on with the like personal attacks or something, and then we obviously move away from that because Destiny is more interested in talking about these personal attacks and diffusing them so that his character isn't like under fire, and he leaves at the wayside the actual like argument and stuff. And the more that she was attacking his character, the less he focused on the argument, which he could have easily like ended if he just focused on it. Another thing that you said was this idea that people can go through this emotional stuff and they could like rip him apart logically at the same time. I feel like it seems that you could do that, maybe, but I think the practical
like in practicality, I don't think that ever happens. I think it's very rare that somebody is super duper emotional but able to maintain like a broader sense of how the conversation is going, how they're being interpreted, where the argument is at, what are all the logical points, and what's their best step like forward. I think once they're emotional, they lose a lot of that.
Hilariously, I think one of the only examples I've ever seen of that is some of the debates that have occurred between me and Sunday, where we're both personally wrapped up in things and strongly disagree. So we've managed that in sort of small dosages with each other, maybe occasionally. But I agree with you that in general, like it's gonna take away from the tenor and the depth of the discussion. So one thing I think is hilarious about what you're saying about Destiny here is that he, by doing this and by going in this what you call like a negative account, like here's what's wrong with you, here's what's wrong with your position, trying to get under their skin instead of building his own argument and reacting to her, he's actually losing the opportunity, as you're saying, to advance a meaningful position. He's kind of screwing himself up, and so then the damage control isn't done in the very process of attempting to do it. So I kind of like how I think you're correct about that analysis, that he's avoiding his own arguments he otherwise would have made by getting so wrapped up in this polemical back and forth. Yeah, and so that's, and again, like I think it's the reason why this is happening in part is that there's an assumption of what we would call like if this was a society, it would be a really bad faith world, right? If we're playing like a game, we turn this into game theory. It's a situation in which it's sort of a tragedy of the commons because each person assumes their interlocutor is in bad faith. And there's really no opportunity to engage, especially if on one end, on Demon Mama's end, the stakes are existential and the harm to a certain community is real in her eyes. So, and I mean, I'd agree with her. But so it's kind of one of these things where it's almost like this is past the point of even being an argument, properly speaking. And I don't know how we would bring it back.
I think it's interesting. You brought up that Demon Mama wasn't responding to points that Destiny would bring up. And I noticed that especially early on. There were, what was really striking about this conversation, a lot of people have accused Demon Mama of sort of imitating Vosh's style. Vosh, of course, takes most of his like trademark stylistic elements from Destiny as well, but he doesn't get the same critique. I think what was happening was it almost seemed like the style was overtaking the argumentation. So at one point, she said that she was surprised because she thought this was going to be the most difficult debate of her life, but he was just sort of... He was just, what did she say exactly? He was shifting or something. I almost wonder if, because I imagine how it feels from Destiny's side is it's a habit he's learned for, like, you know that thing they always do. It's like, wait, that kind of thing. I feel like that's a habit they've learned from online discussion where it becomes very difficult to get a word in if you observe any of, like, you know, the typical niceties you would express in an impersonal conversation, right? In a personal conversation, I mean. And I feel like as an aggressive defense, that's what she was doing, and that absorbed so much of her energy because she had to keep that tension up even when it wasn't organic to the conversation, that she started to lose the ability to actually keep track of what was being said because all of her mental energy was being put on to just keeping that tension there, just making sure that she doesn't appear quiet when he appears loud or what have you. And I think that's really where that kind of thing comes in, because that, I don't know, that style as an aesthetic tool, when it's not actually a part of your character, when it's not a thing that you naturally do, like it's
Well, what it's doing is it's basically mimicking. So here's the thing: is again, like I don't want to attribute cynicism to either of them, especially her, for reasons that I take her claims about the harms caused to trans people through these sort of activities, even if it's not directly intended to harm them qua trans people. Like I take those claims seriously. So and I know you do too. But because that's kind of the highlight of what I'm getting at here. So, but nonetheless, I don't want to say anybody being cynical personally.
Hang on, guys. Audio is apparently down. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. I don't know what happened.
Yeah,
there.
so I don't want to claim anything cynical per se, because I don't, want to assume that what was motivating her was cynical. But it almost looks kind of like when you see these debates back and forth at this level, it's mimicking the kind of passion that gets involved in really rigorous arguments people will put forward in like political philosophy spheres or in other academic spheres. Like, no, like, this utilitarian account of whatever is completely incorrect because look at this piece of information that doesn't fit your observation. And people will do that and they'll get over it and they'll yell over each other and they'll kind of settle out. So it's almost like it's mimicking a deeper style of debate. And so that's a cynical view. The non-cynical view is that, again, they're so caught up on the existential stakes that they just don't feel like they can ever let the other one go, because then they're somehow ceding ground in a way that tells against their character. But what happens is the issue isn't merely like a lack of politeness then between them or a lack of civility, because in tons of really, really rigorous academic discussions and debates, or even just popular debates, people are often totally rude to each other. The issue is that, as you said, it's being kind of weaponized as an aesthetic for either legitimate reasons or not legitimate reasons, for reasons of not wanting to lose existential ground. Who knows? But they get trapped, and it almost becomes kind of this, the viewer almost has to wonder what could ever occur to aesthetically shift the terms of the debate or to bring good faith back into the discussion.
Well, I mean, we're talking about existential grounds in terms of like the stakes of the actual subject of the debate. But what about the actual, what about like surviving the actual debate itself? The reason why it's interesting to me that like she felt like this was going to be a really intimidating debate partner, and of course it absolutely was, is I don't know, I wonder if like the way Destiny engages with antagonistic interlocutors almost, for most people at least, almost forces them to adopt that same style just to, stay above water, to keep that metaphor going a little bit.
Well, I don't want to be providing like hot takes on, YouTubers who I'm not amazingly familiar with, but I can tell you what I think is, from what I've observed, a stark difference between Destiny and Vosh is. Not that this is representative of Destiny. Vosh is the kind of person who can cram one heck of a lot of information into a short time frame without sacrificing the quality of what he's talking about, and he actually has like unique individual takes on things, and cares about advancing what we'd call positive positions, as opposed to kind of just ripping into his interlocutors as his first move. So there's something about Vosh that, even if it's not real or actual, seems sincere and seems intelligent compared to even, let's say, Destiny.
No, I would disagree with that. I think like recently Vosh has definitely toned it down quite a bit, but I think Destiny's usually pretty sophisticated. BookSmarts, did you want to weigh in on that?
I wasn't impressed by him from this, I can tell you that.
I wasn't either. This was atrocious.
So I won't take it as representative then, but yeah.
Well, like for example, like his conversation with Liam O'Mara, who I had on the channel recently, was very good. Here's a question I kind of want to like just make the conversation a bit more productive, or turn in a more productive direction, I should say. Let's imagine that we're in Destiny's position. How would we have gone about this differently? Like from the outset, like even in terms of framing the discussion or having the discussion, like what would you have done given that situation?
I'll let BookSmarts open this one.
Yeah.
I am. I think that one thing that he was able to do at a few different points in the debate is he was able to kind of exert his power as the person who is like hosting the entire debate to kind of stop things and go, wait, hold on, we need to stop. So like, if we're talking about this, like he's able to put the brakes on the conversation, and I don't have like timestamps in front of me, but at several points he's able to kind of stop the momentum and refocus it. And I think that ability could have easily been used for more productive ends. And if I were to pick like one thing based on what we saw in the debate that could have been used to save the debate, it would have been exactly that, using those moments of pausing the conversation to really refocus and to not let Demon Mama start to go off in that direction. But the problem is he likes going off in that direction. Both of their styles are so similar that I don't think one can like comment on what the other is doing. I mean, Demon Mama tried to, and then rather than admitting that this is something that he's doing, like framing her as a crazy leftist or this or that, rather than admitting to those things, he chose to fight on them and to not admit them. And that's where this got really strange. And then every opportunity he had to reframe the conversation, Demon Mama wouldn't respond to a question, or he wouldn't keep up that. And I think he missed opportunities there. He stopped the conversation not to like refocus on logical points necessarily and really hone in on those, but I don't know why he did it, because he would immediately get distracted by other things that she was saying. I think he really needed to not focus on these like character assassination things, Or if he was going to, he needs to be much better at keeping up with the quips. Like in the conversation with Jack AM, and I don't know if you guys saw that one. Have you?
No, not yet. I was going to watch that
No, we
earlier.
haven't.
Yeah.
So this is somebody else who takes a very similar approach to Demon Mama, but much more so, where he comes in and he wants to try and paint Destiny in the worst light possible, except that is the entire crux of his argument. So he's taking a lot of like bullet points of negative things about him and just like gish galloping them as quickly as possible. And Destiny tries to diffuse them like point by point or whatever to varying like degrees of success. But this guy is much worse at speaking, I think, than Demon Mama. So it didn't really work as well. And he's less good at getting under Destiny's skin, I think. And they had a first conversation like that where that was very clearly going to be the person's entire goal. So in the second conversation, Destiny prepped a lot of points about Jack AM. And so he had a lot more retorts and he was able to operate at that level and take him into that pool, like the analogy we were talking about before, and dive with him because he was better prepared that time. But that's not advice I could give in the Demon Mama, and it's not advice I think he would take because he's under the impression that she's a nobody, he shouldn't have to care about her and all this other stuff. And I think that's also part of why he constantly thinks he can compete with her in terms of these quips, despite having no information on her to attack her character in the way that she's attacking his.
He seemed to have two positions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's. Sorry, go ahead.
Sure. He seemed to have two positions not two positions. He seemed to be coming at it at cross purposes. So on the one hand, he was assuming that this person was a nobody who he could just flick off his desk like a fly. But on the other hand, he seemed extraordinarily angry. And as far as I can tell, that's the only motivation for actually having the discussion in the first place. Because, again, as you said, BookSmarts, like it would have been so easy just to take sort of a measured approach, just to respond, especially like when she sort of gave it away at the beginning and just immediately started coming out with the insult.
Yeah, I mean, so can I just sort of like move off of that because I also had a response
please.
to
Yeah.
what you think he should have, what we think he should have done. So again, I think that your point, BookSmarts, that he's under the impression that he doesn't have to care, is accurate. And I think he's also under the impression that in terms of the knowledge-based stakes, it's too weird or strange or out there or problematic to engage in trans issues in a serious sense or to acknowledge what he's done in the Twitter sphere in a serious sense. And so I think that he's scared of making that move. And so his responses reflect that as well. And they reflect the fact he's trying to deflect from actually seriously involving himself in a discussion. So what I'd say if I were him, how I would respond immediately is I would first take the point about intermingling claims around mental illness and trans identity seriously, based on the psychiatric history of transness as a category, and based on the fact that a lot of trans people have been presumed to be schizophrenic, and schizophrenic people presumed to be trans. And historically, there's been an extraordinary eugenic and sort of psychiatric movement to remove trans people from mainstream society and violate our human rights and do all kinds of horrible stuff to us that is just absolutely beyond the pale and is based on this notion that trans people represent kind of natural kind that should not be allowed to reproduce or sort of are instinctually mentally ill or have some sort of identity issue. And I think that even if he wasn't able to get into all of this stuff, and even if it wasn't available to him, that he should have taken that seriously. Just because other people who aren't him on Twitter may weaponize that connection in ways that he would not have. So he should take that seriously. And then the other thing that I thought was actually kind of a bit of a dick move was the fact that he didn't acknowledge the fact that just because his behavior wasn't meaningfully malicious on his own terms doesn't mean that it's not seriously harmful and damaging to people. I mean, you know, his rhetoric about Twitter almost reflected the rhetoric of like large multinational corporations in a sense that just dump all of their oil or crude oil like offshore into a developing nation and say they'll take care of it. Like that's a downstream effect. Just because something is common practice and just because people behave in a way that's repulsive and you're just playing the game doesn't mean that you're morally justified in doing so. So if his goal is reputational damage control, then he really needs to be more critically aware of how his behavior is actually causing harms and how those harms will be construed by other people, whether or not he believes he's doing it deliberately or maliciously. Like, I think that BookSmarts got into this a while ago, where, you know, what's important is, or I think even Demon Mama herself got into it, which is what's important is the causal effect of the behavior, not so much what was motivating it or undergirding it. So for someone as sharp as Destiny, you think he would care more about the moral consequences of doing things, or he would take claims that seem to be based in a real long-standing history of interlinking different types of oppression more seriously, and again, do not know what he has to lose by not getting into those claims. And so if I was him, I'd be immediately on both of those things for the very reason that I cared about reputational control, right, and damage control, if not my moral status as a person, right? So that's kind of what immediately stood out to me.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take a more cynical tack, because I think, like, from a pragmatic standpoint, Destiny and Vosh are interesting to compare to each other, because Vosh started off debating in a style, I mean, it is the same style, but debating very much in the way that Demon Mama did in this debate, where he got a lot of flack, from yours truly included, because he would be acting incredibly uncharitably towards his interlocutor as a tactic, and it was sort of transparent what he was doing. But as he grew, and as he got a more, like, as his growth became stable and on an upward trajectory, he really mellowed out. He got confidence from his position of power, whereas Destiny, starting from that point, seems to have gone in the opposite direction. He used to be, from what I can see, fairly, I mean, of course he originated this whole style to begin with, so maybe this is just the contrast imposing a narrative in my head, but he seems to have gotten bitter, and I don't know, the image I have in my head is of like a senile king or something, who's just now kind of like raging in his chamber, because again, like, from his position of power, pragmatically, he didn't have to do damage control. He personally didn't, I mean, he may ethically owe Cyber Witch Lexi, or whatever her name is, like a greater degree of care and in how he conducts himself towards her, given the size of his audience and what that can do. But he didn't owe Demon Mama personally a conversation at all. He could have denied the conversation to begin with. And a part of me wonders if his thought process was to carry on the conversation once he saw that Demon Mama was going to act in the way that she did, specifically for the purpose of letting that be there as a thing, like letting that be a part of the history that's going to more or less torture going forward. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. I rather hope not. But it's, again, like, the cost of simply leaving that conversation from his perspective was nothing. I mean, if it was me, it would have been so easy just to mute the conversation and go play Minecraft, which is what he typically does. And the memory of this debate wouldn't be Destiny doing remarkably poorly against someone who seems to be, who seems like she shouldn't actually be able to keep him on the back foot so much. Because again, like, later on, like, she clearly lost steam, and I don't blame her, because it looks exhausting. And she was starting to lose the plot of the conversation, and she even undermined her own points almost entirely near the end. Like, she referred to what the crux of the motivating, the motivation for the entire debate, she referred to near the end as, it's a little bit upsetting. It's like, okay, well, it's a little bit upsetting. What was the last hour about? That's.
I mean, I have to say I disagree with you about the fact that if you simply left, is my audio solid now? Because I think the snowball I'm using, I'm like right beside it all the time, is kind of shifty.
No, you're fine. My experience with that is you can be like about 10 or so inches away from it, and your audio should be fine.
Okay, I wasn't really moving around very much. I might have been further away. It's my first pass at using it. So basically, I mean, one of the things that I'm kind of thinking is, if he, at the point at which he was suddenly involved in this discussion, and she was making, regardless of her status in relation to him socially or elsewhere, claims that he was causing real harms to a population of people who, you know, and he was inciting his followers to do similar, whether or not he meant it maliciously or directly, and whether or not it was just by evoking a parallel history targeted to a different group. Actually was doing that. I think at that point he kind of had to stay on, because if he just left, then he looks culpable, right? It doesn't really matter who's issuing that claim at that point. At the point at which he was allowing himself to get into that, and she was making a serious point about harms being caused to a group, and he just left, he would look immensely culpable. His mistake and his hubris was assuming that by staying, and normally this would be the case, that he would be able to work these claims through and actually establish, a position for himself where he at least copped the fact that it wasn't malicious, understood what she was saying, ceded some ground, or framed the discourse better.
Sure, but
I don't think that leaving was the answer. I think that the answer was not to respond the way that he did.
Sure, but
I think leaving would have made it worse.
Yeah, sure, but leaving in this context doesn't really mean the same thing as it would, like, say, if you were to walk off an on-stage debate. In this particular case, what would probably happen, or what he could have done, is leave that discussion, gone onto stream like he normally does, have somebody in chat bring it up, and then in a calm, measured way, concede. And that way he gives Demon Mama none of the cloud of having succeeded in holding Destiny under the water for a long period of time. And he looks good because he's managed to sort of clarify that he's actually a human being and he actually cares about what happens to the people that he engages with on a human level.
I don't know. I don't know if that would be effective either. I mean, honestly, that would not be my style. I think at the point at which it's even remotely possible that she's being sincere and trying to at least make an existential claim in defense of Cyberwitch Lexi, I think that at that point he has to engage her face to face, and to suddenly cede the point elsewhere to a third party would seem cowardly. I think at the point at which there's any kind of existential claim being even possibly made in the background or claims to real harm being caused to a population, even if non-maliciously, he needs to engage directly. And if she's doing it in such a way or perpetuating or continuing despite him ceding and despite him discussing it and despite him working with what she's saying, then at that point I think he could retreat. But otherwise, I think it looks incredibly cynical. So that's just my view of it.
It would be cynical, objectively. That's sort of the stance I'm taking with respect to this. But at the same time...
Yeah, so I don't think it's right.
No, but at the same time, like, people have to care about the engagement to begin with in order for them to care whether or not he was cowardly with respect to his conduct in it. The goal here in this case, the goal to not engaging for longer than as absolutely necessary, and as soon as she starts to speak over him and whatnot, he has an excuse to leave. Not an ethically justifiable excuse, but normatively. Like, he's not really under any obligation to take verbal abuse directly, especially not on his own channel. At that point,
that's a separate claim, right?
No, it's not. I'm saying no, hang on. I'm saying pragmatically from his vantage. Like, I get what you're saying, and I agree. He needs to, in the face of this blip on everybody's radar saying this person was called out on something really serious, is he going to answer it, or is he going to try and sweep it under the rug? Sure. The goal to leaving early is to make sure that blip never appears, because I think Demon Mama was remarkably lucky here. Because Destiny kept on giving her opportunities to keep speaking at him. When it really wasn't wise to do so, certainly not after the hour mark. Had he cut it short, like, this would have been a nothing.
I mean, I guess I have to cede your point, because ultimately I'm so boggled by the fact that he was unable to uptake any aspect of what she was saying to the end of at least clarifying that it was non-malicious, or clarifying that the norms of conduct in the sphere don't allow for him to behave in a similar way on moral grounds, or to cede anything. The fact that he wouldn't do any of this in any level of detail was just so mind-boggling to me that, yes, I guess at that point, if he's not going to do that, he may as well leave, right? So it's more like the more important obligation was to actually try to meaningfully engage. And if he's not going to do that, then sure, I guess he would have to leave and kind of engage cynically afterwards, or do something else, instead of just kind of holding his position endlessly as things become increasingly abusive and ridiculous as they go, right? So I think I'm just kind of hung up on the idea that he ought to not have done what he did. But if he was going to do it, then I guess he should leave, yes.
Okay. Let me put the reverse question to you now.
Sure.
What would you do? What would you have done in Demon Mama's position?
Okay. Which is the position I'm more likely to probably find myself in that discussion. So.
Let's let BookSmarts go first. I'm kind of curious what he has to say.
Yeah.
What was the question?
What would you do in Demon Mama's position? You're approaching this debate against Destiny. How would you have approached this?
I would push it harder. I mean, like, I don't think that
Harder?
her stylistic approach was a problem. I really think that she didn't do a very good job of like tying back into the crux of her logical argument. I think if she pretended like he wasn't addressing her logical argument at all and constantly brought back all the personal attacks to like, and I can't believe that like right now you're defending the damage that you're doing to Trent. Like, I think focusing on that might have been helpful for her, but I don't know. Like, aside from telling her to overhaul her entire style so that she comes off a lot better, that's the difficult thing. She's on my no list of people to like review or give advice to, in particular because her style is like so awful. Like, I feel like most of my problems with her are stylistic, so if she had to keep the style, I guess probably tying it back to her logical points and paying more attention to that level of the conversation would be important. But she spent so much of her mental energy looking for dunks and like paying attention to the logic of what he's putting down in the order it's happening, which is a lot of what the logic bros or debate bro people do, where they kind of if you're starting an answer and it's already not what I want to hear, like you're starting on an unrelated topic, or you're opening with like, you're starting to sound like X, Y, and Z kinds of people, which are awful, and you're like prefacing your argument with that, they like to stop before you actually get to the meat of what you're saying and address that before you're able to like actually get to your response to the logic. And so I think if she paid more attention to that, it might have been helpful, but I don't know. I don't got a lot of advice for her, to be honest.
Well, I mean, my brief engagement with her off of this, because when I saw that debate, I made some comments on Twitter and on YouTube, and I said something to the effect of, and I probably sounded pretty condescending, so my apologies to Demon Mom with respect to that, but I said something to the effect of, like, a lot of people are saying you did really well in this debate. I think that that's a minority, and I don't think that they're correct. I think that you probably won on substance. I think objectively, I think your argument was solid and it wasn't actually rebutted well at all by your interlocutor. At the same time, I think the manner in which you performed, I think the way in which you put so much weight, you relied so much on the insults sort of carrying your momentum through the conversation. I think it's sabotaging your performance and your ability to actually like convey a solid point. And I think it's making people like fellow travelers who are making the same argument against other people and against Destiny, I think it's making them look really bad, and I think it's self-destructive. And the response I got was simultaneously incredibly dismissive and arrogant, something to the effect of like, don't tell me with your 1,000 subs what to do or something like that, because she apparently is like 14K on Twitter or something. It was on Twitch. It was a strange response. I saw other things, like I think in the end comments she said something to the effect of, people just don't like it when, like with respect to critics of her performance, people just don't like it when women talk over men. There was an unwillingness at all to engage positively with any sort of criticism, no matter how you fielded it. I don't know how much of that is cynical and how much of that is a defense mechanism in the vein that Djalma was talking about at the beginning of the conversation, where there are a lot of pressures to make you in her position regard anything that even remotely looks antagonistic as like an actual existential threat, and I understand that. But at the same time, I'm actually kind of like worried for her personally, because I'm seeing all of the premonitions of somebody who's going to have like a really big meltdown later on in the future.
I mean, just to kind of respond to those 2 points really quickly, I need to, and I'm gonna have to head out soon. So
okay, no worries. I think BookSmarts has to go soon too. You've just been on the tail end of a long stream, so we'll wrap this up very shortly.
Yeah, and I'm gonna keep this brief. Basically, in terms of her saying like, you have no right to comment because of the number of subs, I thought she was gonna say you had no right to comment, minimally because you're a cis person presumably, or maybe she doesn't know, but maybe she's assumed that. Like, there'd be a level of cynicism that I would not attribute to her if she at least at minimum said that, despite the fact that it didn't really track her arguments.
Yeah.
The woman point, sure, there's a lot of presuppositions that go into how Destiny would be figuring her. Again, I just see the whole thing as, on her end, a lost opportunity, more so than anything else. She can bring the polemics in, she can bring the aggressiveness in, as long as she's making the terms of what she's saying clear. So I think the most important thing, if I were her, that I would have done is gone in and told Destiny, look, you don't have to be actively malicious in a targeted way against my community in order to be doing things that cause people like me grievous harm. Yeah. And if I had a reason to believe this, and I believed that Cyber Witch Lexi was an awful person, that's fine. But if you are bringing the kinds of attacks against her that cause her harm when she's already in a dangerous and a marginalized position, that's a different type of thing. And so she wasn't sifting through her categories effectively enough. She had to say, like, you didn't mean any malicious harm, sure. However, this was the effect on the person that I'm trying to defend. You may not like her, sure. But the idea that she should be bullied, the fact that she's being bullied off of Twitter as a platform with this kind of transphobic rhetoric, blah, blah, that is not the appropriate part. And at that point, I don't believe, obviously, in sea lioning or anything like that, but I think she would have really benefited from having some quotes. Look at this person say this hideous transphobic thing to this Twitter user, and then she had to leave. Or look at this kind of violence being directed against her. These are the things that aren't appropriate. And you don't need to be doing that maliciously in order for that to happen. So what we want is we want people to go after each other's characters in a way that actually tracks their character, not their marginalized identity, and that positions them in relation to what they actually say and do, which is a basic point, but it's an important point. And also recognizing that because people are coming at Twitter from different social positions and with different stakes and with different levels of threat to their person, that even if Destiny's behavior is non-malicious, it could still have this effect. And just double down on what that meant and double down on the moral distinctions available. And then I'd probably bluntly get into the whole discussion of, okay, if something is common practice, why should it be common practice? What makes it common practice? And furthermore, why are we not even willing to discuss what could possibly harm someone qua their identity as trans? Like, why are we not even willing to go there? And that's pretty much how I'd keep doubling down, even if it got repetitive at a certain point, because at least then I'd be tracking what I was trying to say to him. Right. Yeah, and so any response she gave after that would double down on that point if it was me. I wouldn't go on about, you have no followers, or, you know, I'm attacked as a woman. These are separate points, right?
They're separate points, and I mean, of course, they're unrelated, so they're separate points. But I think the main thing that frustrates me about this is that it actually comes back to the debate itself. So Destiny himself, like, it would have been such a powerful thing for him to just concede the point, ignore the insults, and just say, yeah, you know what, that's fair. I'll try to be more careful in the future. Sorry about that. Can we try to keep the tenor of the conversation a little bit more polite? And do you have anything else you want to talk about? No? Cool.
I mean, here's the thing, is he wouldn't have to say, can we keep the tenor of the conversation more polite, had he ceded that point in a basic sense. That's my intuition.
Oh, I agree with you. Well, I'm not actually sure I agree with you on that. I think that, see, the problem is that this isn't actually the worst thing Destiny can be accused of. In terms of, like, the optics of positions that he's taken. Like, this is a person who is basically given full assent to things like pipelines going over indigenous territory, just not, like, flat out not caring. He's referred to, forgive me if I get this wrong, but the Viet Minh, is that correct? As being akin to terrorists and things like that. I'm probably remembering this very fuzzily, but this is a person who has a lot of stuff that could have been dug up. This particular thing, this was probably something that could have been settled with, like a response video or something like that. I don't know. I'm a little bit frustrated because given the approach that she took, this was the wrong topic. Especially when you have his attention for that long. I would have, like, had a list of different things, and it would have included irresponsibility with respect to that among them. I wouldn't have just made 2 hours about that particular Twitter exchange.
I agree.
Yeah, so I mean, the problem is, from his vantage, he doesn't know that she's not going to do that early on. So if he just concedes to that, for all he knows, she moves on to the next thing, and it gets worse, because the one point he was on was actually really easy to defend. Literally all he had to say was, like, okay, look, realistically, these people are after my job, da-da-da-da-da. I didn't mean it in that sense, and I realized that there was a way in which the thing that I said, despite my intentions, could cause disproportionate harm to this person. I should be more careful in future, you're right. Anything else you want to talk about? That's how he should have gone about it, I think.
Of course.
Yeah. And he would have looked really good had he done that despite the accusations. And in fact, had he done that, he would have looked so good by comparison to Demon Mama, who would have looked really terrible because while he's being conciliatory and civil and, like, thoughtful, she seems really desperate to throw in the punches. I don't know if she would have, like, if she would have reciprocated that sort of de-escalation, but yeah.
So I was kind of with you until that last depiction of Demon Mama. I'm not saying that she wasn't, throwing punches and acting in potentially an underhanded or cynical way as well at points, and wasn't being like incredibly like single-minded and aggressive about how it got once they fell into that pattern of back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I truly believe that had he engaged in that kind of conciliatory stance, that her civility in relation to him would have increased, even just on the basis that she would have gotten what she was looking for, in terms of ensuring that he understood what was existentially at stake. And again, I don't think the problem necessarily was the lack of civility, more so than the fact that maybe neither were fulfilling their conversational obligations. I think there's a slightly kind of different thing going on there. I mean, lack of civility doesn't particularly matter to me. What matters to me is that people actually meaningfully respond to each other's points and engage in real discussion, right?
Lack of
civility, kind of a secondary concern, which facilitates that. But if civility comes at the expense of that, it's also a problem, right? So I'm not obsessed with the notion of civility.
Oh, no. I agree. I'm not saying that the civility was a priority. I'm saying that from the vantage of Destiny, right? Because we're talking about, from his vantage, the fact that she opened up with, you're a massive piece of trash, like that tells him, that tells him that I am in the presence of an enemy who wants me dead, right? So, like,
fine. I forgot about that part. But then here's the other weird thing she did. She's like, here, you're a massive piece of trash. But then you can see, despite that, even in her title and even in how she's framing him, she's like, oh, the fallen titan. And like, look at these ways you went after Sargon. And like, look at all this awesome stuff you did. Like, aren't you being hypocritical? And that was a really big moment for him to say, you know what? Like, your faith in me was not misplaced. I realize I am being hypocritical, blah, blah. And then it would have looked so good because you can see the hint of her actually kind of having formerly been his fan even.
He would have looked he would have looked really big. Like,
I don't think so at all. No? I think there is no reality where he ever takes that or responds that way to that criticism, because it's unfounded. The very idea that he's comparable to Sargon, even with this like minor mistake, I think is like unwarranted, and he's always going to want to fight against that. I don't think there's a reality in which he plays it that way.
I mean,
I don't think she's saying that. Okay.
Oh no, she explicitly said that he's like Sargon. This was later on.
No, she didn't. No, maybe I'm misremembering this, but this is how I saw this, is that she's saying that you used to be one of the people who would put Sargon's feet to the fire about what he was doing. In this respect, you are now acting like Sargon. You're not identical to Sargon, but you're behaving in ways that Sargon would behave. How could you? That's hypocritical. I think that's what she was saying.
I mean,
I don't know though.
I think she did also say that. I maybe was misremembering as well. It was a bloody long stream, but I think that I got the impression. I have the distinct impression in my head that she had said that he had more or less fallen into being like that. I mean, which I guess is sort of like what you're saying.
Yeah, so she was saying that you aren't him. You're behaving like him. Why?
I mean,
that could have been a great opportunity.
Sorry, BookSmarts, you sounded like you were going to say something.
Sorry.
No, I'm on mute, so I don't know what you're hearing.
Oh, okay. That's probably just the microphone moving around. I'm actually kind of inclined to agree with BookSmarts on this, just because, like, what it means to accuse someone of being Sargon at this point is basically to accuse him of being a crypto alt-writer, playing a much dirtier game than I think Destiny is. I think what Destiny's done is he's kind of, it almost seems like he's incorporated a kind of moral apathy into his brand recently, which I don't like. Because again, like, I find his takes very astute. I think actually it's kind of interesting weighing the two communities together between Vosh and Destiny's. I was in Destiny's Discord for a little bit, and I listened to some of the conversations. I think generally Destiny himself is a lot more grounded in terms of pragmatics, and I think this is just a part of his history. He's a person who came from nothing. He did like blue collar jobs, and then he self-educated and went into, I think he was like a game streamer, and then he went into politics. Whereas Vosh came from money, as I understand it, got a sociology degree, and is like, they're a lot more ethically sensitive. I don't know. Like they care about. They care a lot more about the ethics of things, even if they're only fronting that cynically, as they often do. But not all the time. And I generally like see there's more spirit in that community, whereas in Destiny's it seems to be really cold and dour and kind of. I mean, that's not obviously true across the board, and I think BookSmarts would probably have a better sense of what that community is like. I know it's a lot less unified than Vosh's is. Destiny is less of a cult of personality, I think. But at the same
Well,
time,
I mean, I also think that Vosh's community may be unified, but from what I've observed, and again, like I see a lot of pluralism in it, and I see a lot of people, kind of debating and discussing and stuff like that. So I think that there's warmth there. I agree. There's real warmth in that community.
yeah, but I mean, the difference is that Destiny, he has a large following, but I think a lot of his following, I think he has a lot more people who hate him in his following than Vosh does, and I think he attracts a lot of the like the Andy Worski types, way more than Vosh does.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So that's fair. And I mean, like, again, I think what I was hoping for from Demon Mama was, again, like some small degree of subtlety, some distinction between the person and the action, just like I was hoping for a discussion on her end of what a harm actually looks like outside of whether someone maliciously intended to cause it. Like, I just wanted there to be more subtlety, bluntly.
Yeah.
So that's the reality there.
Yeah. Well. Anyone have any final things they wanted to say? I know both of you have to get going. I think BookSmarts had to be off at 5, and I know you just said you wanted to leave, or had to leave, I should say.
Yeah, I got some other stuff I gotta deal with here, but yeah, it was a good discussion, and I think these things are kind of like worth parsing out just even to figure out how to respond to it as a viewer, bluntly. And even one discussion we may have had that we could have more in future is, to what extent do we think that certain moves are cynical or not? What are the stakes involved in things? Like, there's a lot of applied morality and ethics stuff here that's, I think, worth getting into at one point.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry I didn't contribute much. I thought there was going to be more of like a Q&A type thing. But
I mean,
yeah,
hey, if you want to stick around and answer some questions, I'd be happy to run that for a few more minutes.
Yeah,
I just wanted to respect your time. I know you're very busy. You stream a lot more than I do. So, this is actually my first OBS stream of this sort. I was kind of panicking leading up to it. Shoot, how do I get guests on here? I was talking to Chud Logic about that frantically at 1 a.m. last night, but it sort of came together a little bit.
I mean, I'll stick around for Q&A as well for a few minutes.
All right, so audience members, because we are a tiny channel, and let's be totally honest, none of you want to give me money, and I have no right to ask for it. For questions to be acknowledged, I ask that you put an asterisk at the beginning of them. We'll run questions for 15 to 20 minutes. Sound fair for you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. So just ask your questions, put an asterisk at the beginning so I can find them as I'm scrolling on my phone through the chat, because we are extremely low tech here. And we'll, that's how that will do. So, okay, somebody just asked, why don't you just invite Destiny on and ask him all this stuff? BookSmarts, can you explain why that would be a very bad idea? Or would it? Would Destiny actually come on if I asked him? I'm a little bit curious about that. I'm not entirely certain I want to subject myself to that, but...
I'll talk to him.
I don't think he likes talking about the Demon Mama debate in particular.
Oh, I don't think I'd bring that. Well, he didn't publish it on his channel, did he? He kept that down. Well, I mean, I don't blame him. It wasn't a good look, but yeah. Oh, I mean, like, I don't know. We could just bait him in and then redo the Demon Mama debate, but properly this time. Djalma, you can be the chosen one.
Yeah, hey, Sunday, you'll be Destiny and I'll be Demon Mama, and we'll redo the debate, okay? Like, we'll just have the whole debate again.
I feel like
we'll do it that way.
I feel like that's been my day-to-day existence for the past few months.
Yeah, probably not inaccurate.
Yeah. So. No questions, guys?
Everyone's just chilling right now.
Everyone's just chilling.
Oh.
All right.
Noah Watson has a question.
Oh, I see.
To
Yes.
you. In what way is there tangible harm in the Twitter replies of Destiny? I can answer that.
You, please do. This is your area.
So basically, from what I could tell, and I don't have the full facts on this, so if this turns out to be wildly wrong, maybe this is more hypothetical than not. His Destiny's followers may be using some of the rhetoric pinned against mentally ill people against trans people and conflating the categories and using that to harass trans people on the basis of being trans. In other words, just because he wasn't maliciously attacking trans people for being trans doesn't mean his followers aren't going to do the same thing. And it doesn't mean that his followers aren't going to be harassing trans people off of Twitter for being trans. And this is a huge problem, and you want to get the heat off of people from marginalized groups in this way. And so it has to do with basically what his fan base would likely be doing and the kind of behavior that, we see people commonly engage in, where if somebody's like, using the R word or saying the person is deficient, and then they also happen to be trans, the follower base leaps from A to B pretty quickly and goes after them on transphobic grounds. Now, these claims would be 100% benefited from actually examples and things being put on the screen and examples of how this was occurring and how the person was harassed off the platform. But forgive me if I'm cynical that there could be a follower base that wouldn't start to use some transphobic stuff as well. So it has to do with how he would be motivating people to respond based on, for instance, Cyberwitch Lexi's identity. That would be what that would be.
BookSmarts, did you want to weigh in on that at all, or?
No.
Yeah. I mean, I personally largely agree with your assessment. I think I would add as well that quite apart from the actual content of the terms itself and whatever associations there are with as an abusive slur against, well, not an abusive slur, sort of overlap with how people suffering from mental illness have been abused with that. I think in addition to it, I think it signals to bluntly bigots in that audience who see that this is an appropriate target for that sort of attack. So I think that's it sort of it kind of signals to people who are following Destiny, who see that he is not going to come after you for using that kind of language with respect to that person. I mean, of course, he hasn't disclosed what particular grounds he means mentally ill in these cases, but you more or less have the tacit consent of this larger channel, and I think that's really the danger. I think as well, like in terms of harm, I think one of the objections I would anticipate here is that, well, it's just on Twitter, you can just block people. I think he actually says this in the debate. And I mean, to an extent, sure, but at the same time, and Demon Mama brings this up, and it's quite legitimate, there's a volume problem in that the number of people with a channel the size of Destiny's that may be drawn to start tweeting at you or whatnot may be too much for you to actually block. And secondly, like maybe an objection as well, it's just a tweet, right? It doesn't matter. I wouldn't necessarily regard psychological harm as inherently distinct in severity from physical harm. In fact, sometimes it can be a lot worse. I think having hordes of people sending you slurs and treating you as subhuman, I think that probably takes a very serious toll after a while.
No kidding.
So, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't strike me as in any way a stretch to say that what Destiny did was actually conducive to real harm on the person. I think the person in question actually did tweet afterwards saying something to the effect of they were fine, like don't worry about me or something, but it's really neither here nor there, because we're talking about the critique is that Destiny is being irresponsible, not that he has successfully destroyed one individual.
But also, let's imagine that these harms actually do come to people on the grounds of identity as opposed to something they did. What that does is it has a chilling effect on other people who could contribute legitimate content or who had expertise or the ability to interface, then didn't want to do it anymore because they also happen to belong to that same category of people. They also happen to be trans or they suffer from mental illness or whatever. Then it has a chilling effect on the community in general. And then in addition, if the person is being a piece of shit, it becomes irrelevant. Like how they're being a piece of shit is no longer relevant because what becomes relevant is their identity. And so people who are being shitty don't even get called for being shitty. They just get framed in subhuman terms on identity grounds. And so that's like the other issue with that, right? So that's why you don't want to go there.
Yeah. I'm actually going to ask a question of BookSmarts related to this because I'm curious about his take on this. So you've analyzed Destiny's debates and his online activities quite a bit. I'm a little bit curious as to how. What is your perception as to his obligations in terms of how he engages with, especially like smaller channels on these platforms? Like, what is your opinion, or what are your opinions on that?
I think he generally is respectful of smaller channels. I mean, there's a whole history of him trying to help like smaller people that he thinks are doing good things. I think in particular with Demon Mama, she's like coming in here and trying to use the platform that he's offering her to like tear down his character and do a lot more than what she came in to do, which is to like show him that, hey, what you're doing here is problematic with this language and you need to knock it off. And they were on the same page with that already, like logically from the get-go. Like if she would have just approached the discussion in a better way, she would have come to the realization that they share the same opinion here. So that's what makes this conversation so cringy, is that from the very beginning they technically agree. It's just that neither of them decides to work to that point of agreement, and instead they decide to like focus on all the character attack stuff. I think to other smaller streamers, he seems like really respectful. Like, and he tries to boost up people who he thinks like are doing good stuff, like IRI and other people. So, like, as far as like his interactions with small streamers more broadly, I'd say he does a fine job interacting with them. There are times when he's awful, like with Anna Frills or with this person, and I like disagree with the way he's engaging with them. But for the most part, I'd say he's good about it.
Yeah, I like that point that you brought up too. It's like he did offer this person a platform, and I think if I were to rate Destiny positively against someone like Vosh, for example, I think he's much less gatekeepery. Like, he allows really small people to meet him as equals, which is interesting. And I feel like, I mean, at a certain level, he was offering Demon Mama an opportunity to field potentially reputation damaging critiques of him on his channel. That being the case, given that he was in fact hosting, it seemed extremely improper just right out the gate to come off that. I mean, basically to make your opening statement an assault. So, yeah, that's. Yeah, I think I would actually agree with that assessment generally. I wonder if he's just like not temperamentally a large figure, you know? Like, I wonder if he's like, if his mentality is as sort of a mid-tier streamer despite his colossal size by comparison to the average person, because he engages with small people without kind of throwing his weight around as much, I've noticed.
I don't know. I mean, I think he's maybe rightfully got a bit of an ego because he likes to rest on the content of what he's doing rather than, you know, his technical status in a specific sphere. So maybe that's a redeeming characteristic. Maybe it's just that simple. I don't know.
I think that he likes when you can have like a personal back and forth about like personal quips about people, because he knows that in regards to like audience size or these other things, he can obviously win. So he tries not to push the conversation there. But when other people bring it there, he's very happy to admit that, like, no, okay, you're like a nobody. You have no audience. You don't know what you're talking about in terms of like speaking to these people or platforming at this level. I think he's happy to go there when it gets there, but I think he knows he has that one, so he doesn't. I don't think he necessarily pushes things there. He likes waiting for people to like give him an excuse to like go ham. And I think that this was a conversation like the Jack AM one, where you're just constantly getting every excuse to attack this person on every grounds. And when it's a small person that he knows very little about, a lot of these are missing their mark, and they're not based on anything he actually knows about the person. And given that she's small, this like adds to, and that she's there to tell him to be nicer to trans people and he's attacking her. Like, there's a lot that works against him here that doesn't in other situations.
Hephaestion Belaris asks, Demon Mama would have been caught wrong-footed if Destiny had conceded/apologized. Not looking for agreement, but rather I think that she needed Destiny to be a jerk for her to attack. So sorry, that she needed Destiny to be a jerk for her to attack. What are your thoughts?
Depends on whether she's acting cynically. I don't think she necessarily is. I think she approached it in a way that became critically, that was overly critical and problematic. But this kind of reverses the order of causality, or kind of undermotivates what she was doing, because it's like, well, she needs him to be a jerk for her to attack. I mean, why is she attacking? Because he's allowing for a phenomena to occur that might cause harm to people like her. If we believe that, and sincerely he does, then she's attacking to a good end, and she wants him to actually take on what she's saying. If it's some other weird cynical explanation, then I don't know. I mean, that's how I'd read that.
And even if we like assume that that's the case, she's picking probably one of the worst ways to convince someone to like adopt better rhetoric towards trans people. Like, so
Sure.
even if we assume that, like, it's an awful decision. I mean, like, stylistically, from everything else I've seen from Dima Mama, she seems to behave this way in all sorts of debates, or her style more generally is one of like being combative, whether that's like in support of her own arguments or not. She tends to drop the ball like logically on a lot of things, and instead she looks for opportunities to like paint the other side's argument as worse than it actually is. So I don't have a high opinion of her, and that's carrying on into here. I think that she doesn't do the best thing for her position because she's not interested in doing the best thing for her position, or she thinks the best thing for her position is to make him look awful. And I would like to think that she's doing that to be a replacement for him and to get like viewers off of him. And that's not like conspiratorial, because that's how she talks about it both at the end of their debate and after the debate when she's talking to her audience. So I don't think it's too much of a stretch to assume bad faith from Dima Mama, if I'm being honest.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that her interpersonal style is super problematic, and I don't think that she should be necessarily conducting herself that way at all. I just am hesitant to say that she has absolutely no reason other than cynical need for some weird social media related outcome for saying what she's saying, when there's clearly and very obviously a phenomena of people being attacked and destroyed on identity grounds in this platform. So it's like, I don't want to dismiss that when that is really an important and central claim, and it's kind of obvious why one would be concerned about that. I get what you're saying, that like her tactics belie her as somebody who doesn't actually care about that claim. I don't know. Maybe it's just using a bad strategy. I don't want to say, because I don't want to diminish that, right?
I thought that initially too, and I thought that all the way up until when I had to start skipping and I watched the end of the debate, because it, like, my faith in her pursuing this simply to like benefit other trans people and simply to convince them on this point was shaken at every single opportunity he gave her to discuss that point. Every time he asked her a pointed question about, if I change the language this way, would it be bad? Is it only bad because it's mentally ill in relation to trans people? Like, he gave her a lot of opportunities to make that point, and at every point that he did that, she chose not to, or she chose not to make that her central argument. And even when she was cornered on that and was put into a place where she needs to admit that's the core thrust of her argument, she didn't. And then mix that with, again, the way that she performs in other debates, the way she behaved at the end. I would say that, like, I know where you're coming from. You want to constantly give the caveat that, like, there's a good reason that she could be there, but I think that was just a way to get her foot in the door so that she could do all these other awful things, to be honest.
Oh, fair enough.
I'm willing to continue to believe that she was earnestly motivated by a belief that taking down this person in this particular way, and in fact growing her channel, would in fact constitute a net benefit for the people that she was portraying Destiny as, I think rightfully portraying Destiny as constituting a threat to. Yes, I think though, like, when you look at the performative nature of what she's doing, you look at the way in which, like, she's very careful to, like, so much of her her physical presence in that debate, her facial expressions, her hand gestures, they were doing a lot of work. Her tone of voice, her volume, things like that. I think Destiny was talking more or less normally. I think she is deploying a style that Destiny and Vosh use in conjunction with a much stronger intellectual base without that. And I think the problem is, I don't like, later on when she stops going back to the main point, and the thing that made you lose faith in her sincerity, I can see that. On the other hand, what I am wondering is, like, how much of that is just the result of her being tired and getting a little bit delirious just from exhaustion. Because, I mean, like, carrying on that kind of discussion for that long, especially if you're not, like, really, like, you don't have all of your ducks in a row, like, really tightly, that's going to wear you down really fast. And I wonder how much of how much of her losing the plot later on is just due to fatigue and just the sort of practiced mannerisms taking over with the content. Like, she can't even really keep track of it anymore. Like, I wonder how much of this is just she's in over her head, you know? Just
I'm sympathetic to that.
Not because she's dumb, but bluntly, just because Destiny is actually like really, really psychologically tough when it comes to these kinds of things, despite the fragility around like attacks on his ego, things like this that keeps him going. He doesn't tire out. He stays lucid. He loses the plot, but he can regain the plot really fast. I think that once she started to lose the plot near the end, she was gone. And I think the bravado at the end of that debate, I think that was practiced. I don't think it was a sincere reaction. I think she was tired. That's my honest impression. I think this is a person who's extremely tired. But
that's like a Joshua for Congress argument. Like, the reason why our faith was shaking throughout the conversation is because we came in with good faith. We knew that she had like a God-given point that she obviously should have been there arguing about, and it just, that faith kept getting shaken at every opportunity she had to make good points about it. And so that's what I think makes it difficult for us, is like, yeah, I would like to say that she's there for a good reason and she's covering a good thing, and I would like to come up with every excuse for why she's not performing the way that she should be performing if that was the reason that she was there. But I think it's a lot simpler to just, you know, chalk it up to the picture that's being painted.
I see what you're saying.
I think even as the most sympathetic person to her here, possibly, although who knows, that even on my end, you know, obviously I experienced a great deal of frustration with how this debate went, and a great deal of frustration with the lost opportunity to actually, as you say, like, advance that God-given claim that she was, you know, that important claim that she was trying to promote, if she was in fact doing that. So I think the frustration is unanimous between the three of us. I will say that.
I see what you're saying, and I agree with it. But at the same time, I think it's my impression after especially a third viewing, I should say, isn't so much that I think her only motive was the cynical one of just like scoring in some points, having this sensational stream, and then making bank off of audience subscriptions as a result. I think she was earnestly motivated by, I think she has like a personal investment in the position that she was taking as well. So I don't see any reason to doubt her sincerity there. I think she saw it as a viable strategy to do all of the things that would basically ape that more cynical, the more thoroughly cynical approach. I think what she was doing as a tactic to try and win something for a side that she actually believes in necessitated, in her mind, erroneously, a mode of conduct that made her appear extremely cynical and extremely ill-motivated, when it's not clear to me necessarily that that's the case. Now, that's on her, ultimately. Like, she made herself look really bad in this debate, and her conduct outside of the debate to people who criticize her as civilly as possible. I mean, for God's sake, she described your 6-hour thing as molding, despite the fact that you were overwhelmingly sympathetic to her throughout the whole 6 hours compared to Destiny. And it's only near the end that you actually started to, like, come against her again when she was, like really losing it. And really
she called it molding? I missed that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm broadly completely in agreement with what Sunday's saying here. Small claims about civility and other issues aside, and maybe specific angles aside, that's basically my view too of it.
I mean, bluntly, at the end of the day, the problem is that she was acting hateful to somebody, and she continued to do so after the fact. It's just a really bad look, and it hurts people who are on her side. Shall we do one more?
I mean, hateful. Yeah, I wouldn't use that word, but I understand what you're
No.
getting at.
Hateful in the sense of filled with hate, not hateful as in she is hate. Maybe that's the wrong word. Yeah, I agree with you. Wrong word. She was treating people extremely nastily after the fact. That's also the wrong word. That's been used the wrong way.
I mean, and she's not operating in a vacuum, though, is all I'm trying to say. So everything that I previously discussed about his non-response and his refusal to acknowledge that, you know, lack of maliciousness didn't entail lack of harm and all the rest of it still factors into this, but broadly agreed.
Spite, that's the word. Thank you, Sean Croft. It's exactly what you said to Destiny. There's nothing there. You're only motivated by spite. That's what she looked like.
I mean, I disagree with Sean's depiction too, but yeah, we'll move on.
We'll fill him in Among Us later. Last question. Are we good for one more?
Yes, and then I must go.
Yeah. So this is, think the answer is kind of obvious to this. So Noah Watson asks, do you think that Destiny as an online personality is worth discussing beyond the extent to which he has an audience? Or rather, why do you care about the perspective of a professional gamer? I'm going to respond to this one first very quickly. Destiny came to prominence as a professional gamer. I think he is actually fairly sharp. He has a massive that massive audience is important, of course, because that means that talking to him is talking to a lot of people, and defeating him on something or agreeing with him on something, that changes the opinions of a lot of people. So it's intrinsically, just from a purely pragmatic position, kind of essential to treat him as an entity that you have to engage with at some level, to an extent, if you want to be engaging with the broader discourse online at all. In terms of him being just a professional gamer, I've been watching him for quite a while. I think he's actually got a lot of intellectual substance. He's very grounded in a lot of ways. He's very arrogant and unwise in how he conducts himself in a lot of conversations, especially with, this has been in like the quintessential example of that. But I think he has a lot to say that's worth paying attention to. I think in particular, his discussion with Liam O'Mara was fantastic. That's actually what turned me on to Liam O'Mara's online platform. That's why I had him on recently. That was a really good discussion. Does anybody else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I'm not really a fan of, broadly characterizing people according to their primary occupation. I'm interested in what they're actually doing with their platform and how they're engaging people. And bluntly, there's certain things that have a social and cultural clout that are worth engaging with just on that basis alone, if the effects on different groups is real. That's pretty much what I would say about that.
Yeah, this sounds to me like saying we got to disregard AOC because she's a bartender. Like, I think that, like, once this person gains prominence and like you guys said, once they have the audience, there's a lot that comes along with that. So, like, like he's an authority figure. So dealing with analogies or examples that involve him means that I also get to benefit from the air of authority that comes with some of his arguments. So if he's doing an argument that is successful, then I can use that to help bolster like whatever claim I want to make about the point that he's making. And at the same time, when he performs poorly, it offers like a very fun exercise in trying to convince people out of something that they're like kind of predisposed to see one way. Like when I was trying to point out maybe some of the problems that he was having in talking to Demon Mama, it was difficult to like face resistance from his community, but it makes it like tests my ability to communicate things, because ultimately I want to communicate not only to people who are like on the fence, but people who are like viewing it the exact opposite way, because I want to kind of persuade them over. And beyond that, like building experience with his arguments, with his conversations, and with how he engages with people, it gives me analogies that I can use that are shared with anybody else on Twitch. So the longer that I continue to live stream, the more beneficial it is to get analogies and get examples from people that the community is familiar with. So instead of saying like, oh, this sounds like so-and-so philosophy author who says this, this, and this, I can say like, well, remember when Destiny says that you should act this way and you should do this? That's kind of what I'm getting at. And I feel like that's much more effective, and it doesn't require a bunch of explanation, and it comes with a lot of like it comes with a lot of good. Granted, it comes with baggage as well, but like I said before, that's part of what makes it fun.
And like ultimately, I think that I really like that that's what you're doing, what you want to do with your own platform and work and kind of how you see the community, because I think that if we have something important to say, we should be able to find a way to say it to the widest and most varied group of people possible and hear what they have to say back to it in order to make ourselves useful. I think that, making yourself useful if you have something to contribute is kind of an ethical responsibility. And if that requires being in different types of communities and requires interacting with different types of people who maybe you don't personally love or see the immediate value of, but you see how they're impacting people that you also want to engage with, then you got to go there. You got to do that, because that's the point of even being in we live in a society, right? That's even, I'm so tired. That's the kind of the whole point of wanting to do this kind of work to begin with, is you want to make sure that you have a positive impact and you integrate yourself, right? Right, we do live in a society, damn it. So that's that.
That's a good line to end on. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to put a link to BookSmarts channel in the description. I highly recommend to my admittedly modest audience that you give that a look. His deconstructions of debates are actually really interesting. I'm actually tangentially very glad that this awful, awful debate between Destiny and Demon Mama took place, because it's made me aware of that channel. So give that a look, definitely. And yeah, thanks everybody for participating, and especially to BookSmarts for joining us today. And everybody, Merry Christmas and have a good night. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.